The Mekong Delta unfolded like a living painting beneath the soft amber glow of a late afternoon sun, its waters weaving through sprawling rice paddies and clusters of stilted homes that rose above the muddy currents, their reflections shimmering in the stillness. For Tuan, a wiry man of 38, with hands roughened by 2 decades of tending flooded fields, it was a land of breathtaking beauty and unrelenting hardship. He stood on the sagging porch of his family's modest house, the wood creaking under his weight, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sky met the endless canals, a boundary between dreams and reality. The air carried the rich, earthy scent of wet soil and the warm, nostalgic aroma of fish sauce drifting from a neighbor's kitchen, a fragrance that stirred memories of childhood feasts. Inside, his wife, Tui, stirred a pot of rice porridge over a small clay stove, her movements slow and weary, her face etched with the exhaustion of raising their family in the shadow of poverty. Their daughter, Lynn, 12 years old with eyes that sparkled with a quiet determination, sat on a woven mat, practicing multiplication tables in a worn notebook with a stub of pencil, her brow furrowed in concentration. The village buzzed with the rhythmic chirping of cicadas and the gentle lapping of water against wooden stilts, a symphony of life. But beneath this fragile peace lay a relentless struggle against poverty, debt, and nature's wrath, a battle that wore them thin. Tuan's chest tightened as he watched Lynn. She deserved more than the threadbare clothes she wore, more than a schoolhouse with a leaking roof and a single teacher struggling to educate 50 children with crumbling textbooks, their pages yellowed with age. The rice harvests had dwindled over the years, the floods rising higher each monsoon, swallowing their crops and leaving them vulnerable to moneylenders who preyed on their desperation, their interest rates a noose around their necks. That night, as Tuai mended Lynn's torn dress by the flickering glow of an oil lamp, its light casting dancing shadows on the bamboo walls, Tuan spoke the words that had haunted him for months. "I'm going to America," he said, his voice firm, yet laced with a tremor of fear, a resolve born of necessity. "I'll find work, send money back. Lynn will go to a real school, have a future. We'll build a house that stands against the floods, a home where we can breathe free." Tui's hands froze, the needle poised above the fabric, her eyes widening with a mix of hope and terror, a storm of emotion. "Tuan, it's too dangerous," she whispered, her voice quivering with dread, tears welling in her eyes. "The smugglers are ruthless. The border could kill you. What if they catch you? What if I lose you forever, leaving us alone?" Her voice broke, the lamplight reflecting her tears, but Tuan knelt beside her, taking her calloused hands in his, a gesture of comfort. "If I stay, we'll lose everything," he said softly, his voice a lifeline. "Lynn will grow up like us, trapped in this endless fight. I'm doing this for her, for you. I have to try, for our survival." Tui's tears fell silently, her love for their daughter outweighing her terror, her nod a reluctant surrender. They both knew the village offered no escape, only a slow drift toward despair. And so, with heavy hearts, they began to plan, their future hanging by a thread. The journey demanded their last shred of security. Tuan sold their only pig, a sturdy animal that had been their livelihood, borrowed from a lender at an interest rate that would bind Tui for years, a debt that loomed large, and pawned her mother's jade bracelet, a family heirloom passed down for generations, its green glow a memory. He paid a smuggler, a gaunt man with a scar slicing across his cheek and eyes that held no warmth, who promised a path to America with a voice that rasped like dry leaves. The route was a harrowing odyssey, a leaking boat to Cambodia, a stifling truck through Thailand, a rusted cargo ship to Mexico, and a final, perilous trek across the U.S. border. Tuan didn't question the risks. He focused on survival, memorizing the smuggler's instructions, a map etched in his mind. He kissed Lynn's sleeping forehead, held Tui until her sobs subsided into the night, and slipped away under a moonless sky, his heart a tumult of fear and hope, the weight of his family's future on his shoulders, a burden he carried alone. The months that followed were a crucible of endurance, a trial by fire. The boat to Cambodia lurched through the South China Sea, its wooden hull groaning under the weight of 80 desperate souls, water seeping through cracks as waves battered the sides, a fragile shell. Tuan clung to a splintered rail, salt water stinging his eyes, the cries of children and the prayers of adults filling the air, a chorus of desperation, the boat rocking like a cradle of doom. In Thailand, the truck broke down in a dense jungle, its engine coughing to a stop, forcing Tuan to hide in a muddy ditch as police torches swept the area, his breath shallow and his body pressed against the damp earth, mosquitoes feasting on his skin, the sound of barking dogs a threat. The cargo ship to Mexico was a floating purgatory, its hold a suffocating cavern reeking of oil, sweat, and despair, the days marked by gnawing hunger, rations of stale bread and brackish water, and the nights by restless dreams of home, where Lynn's laughter and Tui's smile haunted him, a mirage. In Mexico, coyotes led them through the Sonoran Desert, their demands for more money met with threats of knives and abandonment, their voices harsh against the silence of the dunes, the sand scorching underfoot. Tuan's sandals shredded, his feet bleeding on the burning ground, and thirst parched his throat until his lips split, his vision blurring with each step, a dance with death. He rationed the last drops of water, his mind replaying Lynn's voice, driving him forward through the haze, a beacon. Twice he nearly perished, once when a coyote deserted them mid-journey, leaving them to stagger through the heat with no guide, the sun a merciless tyrant, and again when Border Patrol drones buzzed overhead, their searchlights pinning his group to the ground like prey, the whir a death knell. But in September 2018, Tuan crossed into California, collapsing on the arid soil, his body shattered, but his spirit clinging to life, the taste of dust, a bitter triumph. Los Angeles assaulted him with a symphony of horns and a skyline that pierced the clouds, a city both intimidating and intoxicating, a new world. Tuan found his footing in Little Saigon, a vibrant enclave in Orange County, where Vietnamese voices chattered and the air carried the rich aroma of pho and lemongrass, a scent of home. He secured a job at a nail salon, sweeping floors and organizing supplies for Mrs. Huang, a wiry woman with a stern demeanor, softened by a hidden kindness, her hands deft with the tools. She didn't ask for papers, paying him in cash, enough to rent a corner of a damp garage and send $170 a month to Tui. The garage was a shared space with 8 other men, its walls streaked with mold, its floor cold and uneven, the air heavy with the smell of mildew and unwashed clothes. But Tuan saw it as a foothold, a place to build from, a start. Every dollar saved was a brick in the home he dreamed of, a vision that kept him going through the long, lonely nights, a light in the dark. Life in America was a relentless grind, but it sparked a fragile hope, an ember in the cold. Tuan taught himself English through YouTube tutorials, his ear pressed to a borrowed phone, the voices of online teachers guiding him through verbs and phrases, his accent thick but improving with each lesson, the words a struggle. He marveled at the city's abundance, supermarkets with aisles of fresh fruits, vegetables, and meats he'd never seen in such plenty, parks where children played without fear of rising waters, their laughter a melody, libraries offering a wealth of books and resources at no cost, a stark contrast to the single shelf in his village school, a treasure trove. He forged friendships with others like him: Carlos, a Mexican cook with a hearty laugh; Min, a Vietnamese seamstress who shared her rice; and Pablo, a Guatemalan landscaper who dreamed of a college education, his hands green with life. They were all undocumented, their lives bound by shared fears and small joys, their evenings spent over bowls of instant noodles and tales of home, stories of villages lost to war or flood, families left behind with promises of return, and dreams yet to be realized, a bond forged in exile. These gatherings became a ritual, a way to hold on to their humanity amid the uncertainty, the clink of spoons, a comfort, a family. Tuan's days stretched to 18 hours, split between the nail salon, where the hum of nail drills and the chatter of clients filled the air, and a second job washing dishes at Pho Lin, a bustling restaurant where the broth simmered for hours, its fragrance a comfort amid the toil, the steam a prayer. The owner, Mr. Truong, a refugee who'd fled Vietnam's chaos, noticed Tuan's dedication, his quiet efficiency, his willingness to stay late, and occasionally slipped him extra cash or a warm bowl of pho after closing, a gesture that warmed Tuan's heart, a taste of home in a foreign land, a kindness. By late 2018, Tuan moved into a shared apartment, a cramped space with peeling paint, a leaky faucet that dripped incessantly, and thin walls that echoed with the neighbors' lives, arguments, laughter, the clatter of dishes. But it offered a bed of his own and a sense of progress, a step toward his dream, a milestone.
He sent $250 a month to Tui, who used it to pay the lender's interest, buy Lin a new school bag, and keep the family fed, the coins clinking in her hands a lifeline, a hope. Their weekly video calls were his lifeline, Lin's voice bubbling with excitement as she showed off her drawings, her questions about America filling the screen, a bridge. "About when can I come to America?" she'd ask, and Tuan would smile through the ache in his chest, his voice steady, a promise. "Soon, Con. I'm working for us, building our future, a home." Tuan's dream took root, a green card, a legal path to bring Tui and Lin over, a house with a garden where Lin could play and study, a place where the family could thrive free from floods, a sanctuary. He paid taxes with an ITIN, a small act of contribution to a country that didn't yet claim him, volunteered at a community center, teaching Vietnamese to children, helping them trace the letters of their heritage with patient hands, their smiles. A reward, a legacy. He saved $3,500 in a bank account, a nest egg he guarded fiercely, each deposit a step toward his goal, a foundation. He was cautious, avoiding late-night outings where police might lurk, steering clear of crowded bars, always carrying cash for emergencies, his pockets a lifeline in case of sudden flight, a shield. Ice raids cast a long shadow over Little Saigon, their stories whispered in hushed tones at the salon and restaurant, tales of friends vanishing overnight, families torn apart, homes raided in the pre-dawn hours, the sound of boots a nightmare. But Tuan buried his fear, focusing on the life he was carving from nothing, a sculptor's work. He learned the city's rhythms, navigating its freeways on his delivery bike, memorizing shortcuts through alleyways, finding solace in the hum of life around him, the chatter of market vendors, the laughter of children in the park, the distant wail of sirens, a city alive with possibility, a heartbeat. By 2020, Tuan's efforts bore fruit. He secured a job as a delivery driver for a Vietnamese grocery chain, the pay steady enough to rent a small studio apartment, a space of his own. The place was modest, a single room with a creaky floor that groaned underfoot, a second-hand couch that sagged in the middle, and a window that rattled with every breeze. But it was his sanctuary, a refuge amid the chaos, a haven. He furnished it with thrift store treasures, a wobbly table scarred with use, its surface etched with the stories of previous owners, a lamp that flickered but cast a warm glow, a mattress that creaked but offered rest after long days, a nest. He sent $400 a month to Tuan, who paid off the lender and started a small fish stall in the village market. Its profits a fragile hope against hunger, the market's bustle a new rhythm, a lifeline. Lynn was thriving, her report cards glowing. With praise, her letters filled with questions about America, about skyscrapers, cars, and the snow she'd seen on TV, her curiosity a spark, a flame. Tuan enrolled in a community college night class, studying business to one day open a Po restaurant called Lynn's Light, where Tuan would welcome customers with her gentle smile, and Lynn would study at a desk under red lanterns, her future secure, a dream alive. Tuan's English sharpened, letting him joke with clients, charm the nail salon's regulars with tales of his village's floods, and negotiate better tips on his delivery routes, his wallet growing thicker with each successful run a reward. He joined a soccer team with Carlos and Pablo, their Sunday games a burst of freedom amid his grueling schedule, the field a place where borders dissolved in laughter, sweat, and the thud of the ball, the camaraderie a balm, a brotherhood. Life was exhausting. His body ached from long hours, his hands roughened by dishwater and delivery bags, and the threat of deportation lingered like a storm cloud. But it was good, a life worth living. He felt a growing sense of belonging, even if the law deemed him an outsider, his heart swelling with pride at each milestone, a citizen in spirit. By 2022, Tuan had saved $8,000, a nest egg for his family's future, and he dared to dream of a day when Tuan and Lynn would join him, when America might embrace him as its own, a home at last. But the world shifted beneath him. In January 2025, Donald Trump returned to the White House, his campaign promises of mass deportation now etched into law with ruthless efficiency, a policy of exclusion. News channels blared with footage of ICE raids in sanctuary cities like Los Angeles, agents storming homes in the pre-dawn hours, workplaces during lunch breaks, and even places of worship during services, their black vests a symbol of fear and division, the sound of helicopters a constant threat, a siege. The Alien Enemies Act, a law from 1798, was dusted off to expedite deportations with minimal due process, its archaic words a weapon against the vulnerable, stripping away rights with cold precision, a legal guillotine, a relic reborn. Social. Media overflowed with videos of immigrants handcuffed, loaded onto planes, their faces blurred but their anguish palpable, their cries echoing in Tuan's sleepless nights as he scrolled through his phone in the dim light of his apartment. The images a wound, a scar. In Little Saigon, fear settled like a thick fog, its tendrils creeping into every conversation. The streets quieter than ever, a hush of dread. Businesses closed as workers stayed home, too terrified to step outside, their livelihoods hanging. By a thread, the silence deafening, a void. Tuan stopped volunteering, afraid the community center might be targeted, its children caught in the crossfire of a policy he couldn't comprehend, the thought a knife in his gut, a fear. He worked longer hours, saving every cent for a crisis he sensed looming, his hands trembling as he counted his tips under the flickering light of his lamp, the numbers a lifeline, a hope. He sent Tuan $700 that month with a note. "Keep this. Safe. Things are growing darker and I need you to be strong for Lynn, for us." At Pho Lin, Mr. Truong gathered the staff after closing one rainy night. The restaurant's warmth a stark contrast to the chill outside, the rain tapping against the windows like a warning, the steam rising from the broth a fleeting comfort, a memory. "They're not just taking criminals," he said, his voice heavy with dread, his eyes scanning the tired faces around him, the lines on his face deepening, a map of worry. "They're rounding up anyone without papers. I can't shield you if ICE comes. Be ready to run and may the spirits protect you, a prayer." Tuan's dreams began to fray at the edges, the threads of his hope unraveling with each word, the weight of inevitability pressing down, a burden. He lay awake on his creaky mattress, picturing agents bursting through his door, tearing him from the life he'd forged with sweat and sacrifice, the image vivid in the darkness, a nightmare. He thought of Tuan and Lynn, of the house he'd promised, of the desert he'd crossed for a glimmer of hope. Its sands still haunting his dreams, the thirst a memory etched in his bones, a scar. Fear became his constant companion, a shadow that followed him through the streets, but he pressed on, fueled by love and a stubborn refusal to surrender, his resolve hardening with each passing day, a fire that refused to die, a flame. The blow fell on a Wednesday morning in November 2025, just as the first light crept over the city, a pale glow that offered no warmth, the air crisp with autumn, a false dawn. Tuan was at the nail salon, wiping down the counters with meticulous care, the scent of acetone and polish lingering in the air, the hum of the morning routine, a fragile comfort, the silence before the storm, a calm. The door crashed open, and 9 ICE agents in dark vests stormed in, shouting, "Immigration! Hands up! Don't move a muscle!" Tuan's heart stopped, his cloth slipping to the floor, his breath catching in his throat as adrenaline surged through him, a primal fear taking hold, a shock. The agents moved with military precision, demanding IDs, their radios crackling with urgency, their boots thudding against the tiles, the sound a drumbeat of doom, a march. Mrs. Huang protested, her voice rising above the chaos. "He's a good man. He works harder than anyone. Leave him be." But an agent seized Tuan's arm, yanking him toward the exit with a grip like iron, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights, a symbol of authority. A chain. "Name!" the agent barked, his eyes cold and unyielding, a predator assessing its prey, the words cutting through the air, a command. "Tuan Pham," Tuan replied, his voice a whisper lost in the tumult, his mind racing for an escape that didn't exist, the reality sinking in, a surrender. "Papers." Tuan shook his head, his silence a confession, and the agent's expression hardened, a flicker of disdain crossing his face, the moment frozen in time. A judgment. Outside, a van waited, its doors gaping like a predator's maw, its engine idling. With a menacing hum that sent a chill down Tuan's spine, the sound a harbinger, a threat. He was handcuffed, the metal biting into his wrists, a sharp pain that grounded him in his terror, a mark and shoved inside, joining 40 others, their faces etched with terror, their eyes reflecting a shared doom, the van a rolling prison, a cage. The van sped to a detention center on the outskirts of Los Angeles, a grim fortress of concrete and barbed wire, its walls a stark reminder of his vulnerability, the journey a blur of flashing lights and muffled sobs, the city fading, into the distance a loss. Tuan was processed like a cog in a machine, fingerprinted with ink that stained his hands a deep black, photographed with a flash that blinded him, assigned a number that erased his name and reduced him to a statistic, the dehumanization complete, a number. His phone was confiscated, its screen dark with memories of Lin, his belongings dumped into a plastic bag that crinkled with every movement, a pitiful remnant of his life, the weight of loss pressing down, a void. He was led to a cell with 60 men, the air thick with the stench of sweat, urine, and despair, the fluorescent lights buzzing incessantly, a relentless drone that gnawed at his sanity, the walls closing in with each breath. A tomb. Tuan sank to the cold, grimy floor, his mind a whirlwind of panic and grief, his body trembling with the shock of his new reality, the cold seeping into his bones, a chill. What would become of Tui and Lin? Would he be sent back to Vietnam? To the village he'd clawed his way out of, to face the floods and debts he'd fled? A failure in their eyes, the shame a burden, a weight. He thought of his apartment, its modest furnishings a testament to his labor, the wobbly table where he'd eaten alone, the lamp that had cast a warm glow on his dreams, the mattress where he'd planned his family's future, his savings, the life he'd built from the ashes of his past. A creation. It was slipping away and he was powerless, a prisoner in a system that saw him as less than human, a shadow to be erased, the injustice a bitter pill, a poison. Days melted into weeks, each one a purgatory of monotony and dread, the routine of meals, stale bread and watery soup, the taste a mockery, and head counts a numbing cycle, the hours stretching into eternity. A sentence. Tuan shared his cell with men from Honduras, Pakistan, Ethiopia, their stories a tapestry of suffering, treacherous journeys across oceans and deserts, dreams shattered by borders, families torn apart by policies they couldn't fight, a shared pain, a bond. Some had been detained for months, their faces gaunt with waiting, their eyes hollow with hopelessness, a reflection. Others deported in the dead of night, their absence a silent wound that lingered in the cell's stale air, the echoes of their voices a ghost, a memory. Tuan's only lifeline was a pro bono lawyer named Rachel, a young woman from an immigrant rights organization, her face marked by the weight of too many cases, her hands steady despite the burden she carried, her eyes a window to her compassion, a light. She visited after 14 weeks, her presence a beacon in the gloom, her briefcase worn from constant use, a tool of justice. "Tuan, your case is an uphill battle," she said, spreading papers across a metal table, her voice a mix of compassion and realism, the rustle of pages a sound of hope, a promise. "You've got no criminal record, which is a point in your favor, but the administration's using the Alien Enemies Act for expedited removals, stripping away due process, a legal guillotine. I'm filing for asylum, arguing you'd face economic persecution in Vietnam due to the floods and debt, the village's ruin a testament. It's a long shot, but it could delay your deportation and give us a chance to build a stronger case, to fight the tide, a war." "What are my chances?" Tuan asked, his voice raw, his hands clenched on the table. The cold metal a stark contrast to the warmth of his memories, the question a plea, a cry. Rachel's gaze softened, but her honesty was unsparing. A truth he needed, a mirror. "Not good. The system's stacked against you, especially now. The policy's a wall, a fortress, but we'll fight with everything we've got. Every motion, every letter, every ounce of evidence, every voice we can rally." A chorus. Tuan gave her Tui's number, his voice breaking as he pleaded, "Tell my daughter I love her. Tell her I'm trying to come back to her, to give her a future, a promise." That night, he dreamed of Lynn running through a rice paddy, her laughter swallowed by rising floodwaters, her small hand slipping from his grasp as the currents pulled her away, the water a thief, a loss. He woke gasping, his face wet with tears, the cell's cold floor a stark contrast to the warmth of his memory, the dream a haunting echo of his fears, a nightmare that lingered, a scar. Weeks stretched into months, the detention center a labyrinth of despair where time lost meaning, its walls a prison of concrete and silence, the days blending into a haze, a fog. Rachel's visits were Tuan's only tether to the world, her updates a fragile thread of hope amid the gloom, news of filed motions, gathered affidavits, letters from Mrs. Huang, Mr. Truong, his soccer teammates, and even a neighbor who'd seen his kindness, all attesting to his character, his quiet generosity, his tireless work, his love for his family, a testament, a choir. But the system was a juggernaut, its wheels turning toward expulsion with relentless force, a machine without mercy, a tide. In August 2026, Tuan faced his day in court, a cramped room downtown where an immigration judge with a stern face and wire-rimmed glasses presided, his gavel a symbol of finality, the air heavy with the weight of judgment, the tension palpable, a storm. Rachel argued with fierce determination, her voice ringing with conviction, a warrior's cry, a shield. "Tuan Pham is a cornerstone of his community," she said, her hands gesturing to the stack of letters, a fortress. "He pays taxes, volunteers, supports his family from afar with every dollar he earns, a model of resilience. Deporting him would be a travesty of justice, a loss to a nation that claims to value hard work and humanity, a stain on its soul, a wound." The government's attorney, a man in a pristine suit, responded with clinical detachment, his words a blade of ice, a prosecutor's precision, a cut. "Mr. Pham entered illegally. He has no legal right to remain. The law demands his removal to uphold national security and deter future unauthorized entries, a necessary sacrifice, a duty." Tuan testified, his English halting but heartfelt, his hands trembling as he spoke, the weight of his story pressing down on him. A burden shared, a tale. He described his village, The relentless floods that devoured their livelihood year after year, the debt that chained his family to a life of servitude, the moneylender's threats that haunted his dreams, a cycle of despair, a prison. He told of Tui and Lin, the money he sent to keep them alive, the life he'd built in America with sweat and sacrifice, washing dishes until his hands bled, delivering groceries through rain and traffic, teaching children their mother tongue, a labor of love, a gift. "I love this country," he said, tears glistening in his eyes, his voice breaking with emotion, a plea from the heart, a cry. "It gave me hope when I had none, a chance to give my daughter a future, a dream to hold. Please, don't take it away, don't break us, don't shatter me." The judge listened, his expression a mask of neutrality, his pen scratching notes, the silence a heavy burden, a weight, and promised a ruling in 6 weeks, leaving Tuan suspended in a void of uncertainty, the courtroom's stillness a prison. For wait, Tuan returned to detention, hope a flickering ember in the darkness, its light dimmed by the judge's reserved demeanor, the weight a torture, a crucible. The ruling came on a rainy October morning in 2026, the drops pattering against the courtroom windows like tears, the air thick with tension, the sound a dirge, a lament. Rachel sat beside him, her hands clasped tightly, her face a mixture of resolve and dread, her fingers white-knuckled, a silent prayer, a hope. The judge read from a prepared statement, his voice monotone, each word a hammer blow, a sentence, a fall. "Mr. Pham, your contributions to your community are noted and commendable," he began, and Tuan's heart leapt, a surge of relief warming his chest, his breath catching in anticipation, a fleeting hope, a spark. But the next words crushed him, shattering his fragile dream, a fall from grace, a break. "However, your unauthorized entry and lack of legal status require your removal. I order your deportation to Vietnam. The laws demand." A command. Rachel gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, a choked sob escaping her lips, vowing to appeal with every resource at her disposal, her voice trembling with determination, a fighter's spirit, a flame. But Tuan barely heard her, the room spinning around him, his thoughts consumed by Lin's face, her bright eyes, her trusting smile. Tui's voice, the life he'd lose, the dreams that dissolved like mist, a fog of loss, a void. Back in detention, Rachel visited one last time, her eyes red with unshed tears, her voice breaking with emotion, a farewell, a goodbye. "The appeal could take years," she said, her hands gripping the table for support, a lifeline, an anchor. "But with the current administration's policies, it's a slim chance, a battle against a tide we may not turn, a war of wills. I'm so sorry, Tuan. I'll keep fighting for you, for every story like yours, a voice in the wilderness, a cry." Tuan nodded, his spirit numb, the weight of defeat settling into his bones, his eyes fixed on the floor, the cold a companion, a shroud. He wrote a letter to Tui on smuggled paper, his handwriting shaky, the ink smudging with his tears, each word a painful confession, a goodbye, a plea. "My love, I failed you. I wanted to give Lin everything, a school, a home, a future, but I'm coming home with nothing, a broken man, a shadow. Tell her I love her, that I tried, that I'll find a way to keep going, for both of you, though. My heart is heavy, a stone, a weight." In November 2026, Tuan was loaded onto a deportation flight, a chartered plane packed with over 100 detainees, all shackled like criminals, the clink of chains a somber rhythm, a dirge of captivity, a march. Nurses moved through the aisles, their faces impassive, checking pulses with detached efficiency, their hands clinical, a routine, while guards patrolled with cold precision, their boots thudding against the floor, their eyes scanning for trouble, a watchtower's gaze, a sentinel. The plane lifted off, Los Angeles shrinking below, a city that had been his home for nearly 8 years, its lights fading into the distance like a dream slipping away, the skyline a silhouette against the dawn, a farewell, a loss. The flight lasted 32 hours, a grueling ordeal of cramped seats, the hum of engines a constant drone and the clatter of restraints, a cacophony landing in Ho Chi Minh City under a grey dawn, the humid air hitting Tuan like a memory, thick with the sense of his past, rice, fish, and the faint tang of regret, a return to roots, a circle. Vietnamese officials processed him with brusque efficiency, their hands quick and impersonal, handing him a bus ticket to his village, their eyes devoid of empathy, their voices a monotone drone, a bureaucracy's indifference, a machine. He had no money, no phone, just the clothes on his back, faded and wrinkled from his ordeal, and a plastic bag containing his tattered sandals, a relic of his journey, its leather cracked and worn, a symbol of his struggle, a scar. The bus ride was a slow unraveling of time, the landscape unfolding like a faded photograph, rice paddies glistening with dew, water buffalo plodding through the mud, motorbikes weaving through traffic with their familiar honks, the sounds and sights a bittersweet echo of his youth, a past reclaimed, a memory. It was home, yet it felt alien, a place where Tuan's transformed soul no longer fully belonged, his heart divided between the delta and the city he'd lost, a torn tapestry, a split. He had changed, hardened by America's promise, softened by its rejection, his hands still bearing the calluses of dishwater and delivery bags, his spirit marked by the journey, a map of survival. When the bus reached the village, Tui stood at the stop, Lin clinging to her side, her small frame now taller, her eyes wide with a mix of joy and uncertainty, a child grown, a hope. Lin, now 19, stared at her father, hesitant, her voice, a whisper, a question, a bridge. "Ba," she said, the word trembling with emotion, a reunion. Tuan dropped to his knees, pulling his daughter into his arms, the embrace a lifeline after years apart, his tears soaking into her hair, a release, a healing. Tui joined them, her sobs shaking her frail frame, her tears mingling with his, their reunion a fragile bridge over the chasm of separation, a mending, a bond. They held each other as the sun dipped below the horizon, the Mekong swallowing the light, its waters a silent witness to their pain and perseverance, a river of memory, a testament. The village welcomed Tuan back with open arms, their voices, warm with relief, their hands clasping his, a welcome. But the poverty he'd fled remained an unyielding foe, its grip as tight as ever, a chain unbroken, a curse. He returned to the rice fields, his hands relearning the harvest's rhythm, the familiar ache in his muscles a bitter reminder of his past, the mud sucking at his feet with each step, the work a penance, a return. Tui's fish stall kept them alive, its modest profits a fragile shield against hunger, the early mornings and late nights a testament to her strength, her hands calloused like his, a partnership. But the dreams of a new house, a better life, visions of a garden where Lin could play, a room where she could study, a kitchen where Tui could cook without fear, were ashes scattered by the wind, their embers cold, a fire extinguished, a loss. In America, Rachel continued the fight, sharing Tuan's story at protests and in articles, her voice a beacon for immigrant rights, her pen a weapon against injustice, a cry in the night, a call. His case became a rallying cry, a symbol of the 2025 crackdown's human toll, its echoes reaching beyond Los Angeles to inspire marches and petitions, a movement born of pain, a wave. But the raids persisted, and the planes kept flying, their engines a constant hum of loss, a reminder of the borders that divided families, a wound unhealed, a scar. Tuan never surrendered hope, though it flickered weakly, a faint glow in the darkness of his return, a candle in the storm, a light. He taught Lin English, using words he'd learned in America, freeways, nail salons, friends who'd become family, his voice steady as he recounted tales of Los Angeles, of its chaos and kindness, of the life he'd built and lost, a narrative of resilience, a story. He described the soccer games, the laughter of his teammates echoing across the field, the warmth of Mrs. Hung's occasional smiles, the hum of the city that had once been his, a symphony of memory, a melody. He spoke of the deliveries, the rain-soaked rides, the tips that had built his savings, the community center where he'd taught, each memory a thread in the tapestry of his American years, a legacy woven, a gift. "One day," he said, his eyes meeting Lynn's, "you'll see it. You'll be free to chase your dreams, to build something better, to rise above this place, to break the cycle, to soar." Lynn listened, her eyes alight with possibility, her young mind absorbing the lessons of resilience, her heart swelling with a determination born of her father's sacrifice, a spark ignited, a flame. In his voice, she heard not defeat, but the unyielding spirit of a man who'd crossed an ocean for love, a spirit that refused to be broken despite the odds, a legacy she vowed to carry forward, a torch to bear, a future